Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Magedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. In the first 4 verses of this 13th chapter, which we saw last week, we saw that Krishna begins the discussion by pointing out these 2 categories, Kshetra and Kshetrajna, matter and spirit. And recognizing the distinction between the 2 is important, because only when we are able to separate out matter from spirit, it is only then that knowledge comes. Because the problem, ignorance, at present constitutes somehow matter and spirit have got mixed. Have they really got mixed? And the answer is no. They cannot get mixed because the characteristics of the 2 are mutually opposite. If spirit is immortal, free, matter is mortal in the sense that it's perishable. Again, matter in the sense that no forms, nothing remains constant, and the results of everything material we see is bondage, stress, anxiety, worry. Completely opposite to the characteristic of spirit. Now, how can these 2 opposites ever combine? Can light and darkness combine? We know that the 2 are opposites, so if there is light, then there is no darkness. If there is darkness, then there is no light. Can knowledge and ignorance combine? No. So, in reality, spirit and matter cannot combine. If they cannot combine really, can they combine unreally? And well, you can say, well, if it's not real, anything is possible. The only thing is, if it is something real, then we have to think about whether it's logical, whether it makes sense. But if it is not real, then anything is okay. It's like you can go and enjoy a Harry Potter books or Harry Potter movies, and 8th book is on its way. I just read today. So you can enjoy them. The problem is only when you begin to ask, is it real? But if you accept, no, it's fiction, but it's enjoyable fiction, then everything makes sense. Exactly in the same way, matter and spirit, have they really combined? No. Unreally, anything is possible. Now, the problem is here. When something is unreal and we begin to see it as real, then there is a problem. Now, look at ourselves. We see that there is the body, there is the mind, but we know that besides the body and mind, that there is something deeper within us, a deeper truth within us. That deeper truth, that deeper reality is the spirit. So apparently, the body, mind, spirit seem to be living in pretty good harmony. And that's how we tend to think of ourselves as body, mind, spirit. And never mind, we say, well, the body and mind are really coverings, that we are really the spirit, and yet, but somehow they seem to be hanging around together. What Krishna is telling us in this chapter is, okay, if that's our present experience, that's fine. But just recognize which of these entities are material, which is spirit, recognize the distinction between the two. And he described in verse number now he'll describe actually what we're going to study today, verses 5 and 6. He begins with describing what is the material part of this creation. Both individually, our material part is clearly the body, mind, and all of that. But even in a cosmic sense, the world around is also made of matter. So it's this material part of this world that he'll first address in verses 5 and 6. So let's read them together. Mahabhutanyahankaro buddhiravyaktameva cha indriyani dashaikancha pancachendriya gocharaha ichchadvesha sukham dukkham sanghataschetana dhritihi etat kshetram samasena savikaramudahritam. The five great elements, egoism, the intellect, and the unmanifest, the 10 sense organs, and the one mind, and the 5 objects of the senses, desire, aversion, happiness, misery, the body, intelligence, and patience. Thus, the kshetra has been described in brief together with its modifications. So, whatever comes under the category called matter is described here very briefly. Let's take them up one by one. First, the 5 great elements. The Sanskrit word here is Mahabhuta. Now, every religious philosophy presents some story, if you like, or some version of how this material universe came about. In terms of science, one of the theories, of course, is the Big Bang, and then the string theory, and there are any number of theories about how did all this come about. So just like science has its theories, many religious philosophies also have their own theories about how this came about. So one of the ingredients of the theory is actually referred to here. The interesting theory in Vedanta is that throughout this Vedanta text, the different texts, they have given many different versions of how this universe came about, which could be problematic. It's like, well, if it's your theory, why are you changing your theory now and then? Why aren't you being consistent? For instance, now, if you read in the Bible, so there is this theory about how God made the world in 6 days and then he rested. And the scripture says that light and darkness and how mountains and everything came about. So similar stories exist in Vedanta literature also, with one distinction, and that is there are many different stories. So if one of the Vedanta texts says this is how it came about, and a different book gives a different version of how it came about. And a natural question would be, why can't you stick to one theory? Why do you have many theories or many stories about how this world came about? And the reason that there are these many stories is that none of these stories are taken to be real. And the example I sometimes like to give is this, that suppose there's a little baby at home. Maybe your son or a daughter or a grandchild at home, a grandson or a granddaughter. And normally, at least in olden days, nowadays if you want to put children to sleep, just give them an iPad or something, they'll keep on playing with it until they get tired and fall asleep. But before all these things came about, usually the elders in the family would go and tell us a story, maybe a fairy tale or something, and the children would be listening to it. And then slowly they fall asleep, and then that's it. And if you're a good storyteller, the next day the children would say, tell me the story again. Now, because you're you're not oftentimes telling them some story from history or something. Oftentimes, when the children are very small, you're just kind of making it up as you go. So if they want to hear about demons or some elf or whatever, and so suppose you go on making up, say, oh, he was this demon, and then he had this huge blue hair and these big eyes, and so you describe the demon, and the child then goes to sleep. And then next day the child says, Grandpa, please tell me the story again, and you start telling a story, and then the child says, no, not this one, tell me yesterday's story. And you have completely forgotten what you have mentioned yesterday because you were just making it up. Yeah. And then you say, this demon had this green hair. And then this little one says, wrong, it had actually blue hair. And you don't argue with the child. You say, okay, blue hair. You don't so much care about this because whatever, you know that, well, ultimately it's not true. That's the attitude in Vedanta. In fact, Vedanta says it's a strength. The Vedantic strength is that there is not just one story. The idea is this: if this world were really true, if all these things had really come, then obviously there could be only one story. You couldn't make it up. But because it's not really real, you can make it up. And so therefore they say, because it's not real, these different versions are okay. Because the idea behind all these stories is this: it's not to tell us that the world has really come about or the material universe has really come about, because it's already there. Whether we like it or not, who cares how it came about? It's already here. What we need to know is, if this is a problem, how do we get out of it? If this is a misperception, then how do we get out of it? So they are not so much concerned about how all this came about. Their more focus is on how to get out of this mess. And so there's 5 great elements. So in this story, usually the story begins with the 5 great elements. And the 5 great elements in Sanskrit, they say it's Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Up, and Prithvi. Sanskrit terms, you don't need to remember them. The first, Akasha, means space. So the subtlest manifestation of matter, the very first manifestation of matter was space. And then from space came air. And then from air, the next manifestation was light or fire. Next was water. Then was this earth or this solid material thing. And then, of course, all these 5 primary elements then mixed with each other in various proportions, and then this whole world came about. Now, all of these 5 things that I mentioned were in an extremely subtle form. So when I say water, don't mix it, don't mistake it for this water. This water is pretty gross. So that water, the first manifestation, is very, very subtle. The Sanskrit word for that is called tanmatra. Tanmatra means just the potentiality. So the first manifestation of matter was the potentiality of space. From it came the potentiality of air. Then came the potentiality of light. Then came the potentiality of water. Then came the potentiality of solid. Now these potentialities, the power to manifest into that. So these 5 elements then mixed with each other. And then, of course, they have another story about how they mixed with each other, in what proportion they mixed with each other. Now, we don't need to get into that now. Again, that's a story, so it really doesn't matter so much. But the idea is this, that the material particle that we see is a combination of all these five. So a solid material particle, a solid thing that we see, has not only that earth element in it, but it also has a little bit of water, a little bit of fire, a little bit of space, a little bit of this. In other words, all of these elements are present in every tiny bit of this universe. Egoism, which is really the cause. How is egoism the cause? Think about it this way. In some sense, we are creating the world every day. So there are now I'm making it, I know I'm making it a little bit more complicated, but just bear with me. One way of thinking of creation is clearly that creation which God did, God knows when. That's one way of looking at it. But looking at creation from a standpoint of an individual will be when we are asleep, when we are in deep sleep, there is no creation, there is nothing. Nothing. There is just, there's nothing really. You cannot even say there is nothing, because there is no one to say there is nothing. Now, when you open your eyes, when you wake up in the morning, for you, this world appears. And whether this world existed when you were asleep, don't worry about it right now. As far as you are concerned, at the beginning of the day, you have created this world. But even before you created this world, what was necessary for this world to create was an ego. When you were fast asleep, you didn't have the sense of I, and therefore there was no world. First thing, you wake up in the morning, you're not really saying I, but you become aware of yourself as a person. Once you know I am this, then suddenly you see, your eyes open and you see this world outside which is not you. And that is how the five great elements and its cause, or which is preceded by ego or ahankara, the intellect, buddhi, awareness, consciousness, and the unmanifest, which is still a subtler part of that. Then the 10 sense organs. Now, all our contact with the world, how do we grasp this material universe? How do we even know that the world is out there? How do we become aware of the presence of the world outside? And that we become aware through our senses. So we have 10 senses. So 5 of these are considered senses of knowledge, and 5 are considered sense of action. Why are they considered senses of knowledge? The Sanskrit word for that is jnana is knowledge, sense is indriya. So they are called jnana indriya, jnanendriya. Now why are they called senses of knowledge? They are called senses of knowledge because they play a major role, not the only role, but the major role in getting knowledge. And knowledge can come through visuals, through seeing, through feeling, through touch, through sound, through any of these ways. So now, my eyes are closed, I don't see anything. I open my eyes and I see this glass filled with water in front of me. So it is this sense of mind which has the capacity to absorb this data, this sensory data, this visual. This goes then it presents it to the mind presents it to the intellect, and the intellect says, oh, that's a glass filled with water. And then I get the knowledge, this is glass filled with water. Now, eyes are an integral part of it. If my eyes were closed, I wouldn't know that there is a glass of water. So for me to get the knowledge that this is a glass of water, my sense of perception, sense of seeing played an important role. And that's why this is one of the senses of knowledge. But we know that awareness of the world comes through us not simply through visuals, it can come to us through sound. I hear sound. So again, that's the sense of hearing. Awareness, knowledge can come through sense of touch. I know whether this is solid or liquid. I don't even have to see it. I can just feel it and know it. So some knowledge can come through touch. If I pour some amount of ice cream on my hand, let's say, I'm not really tasting it. I would know it's something cold. So some knowledge will come about it's something cold. But there's another kind of knowledge that can come from it if I put it inside. And then, so my sense of taste will give me the kind of knowledge which simply my hands cannot give. So we have all, and then of course there is the sense of smell, the fragrance that we get. The beautiful flower, how that flower, unless we have the sense of smell, we wouldn't be able to get that fragrance. So knowledge of the world that comes through us through sound, sights, smell, taste, and touch, these are the five senses of knowledge. So similarly, there are five senses of action through which we are able to get things done. So it can be hands, feet, the sense of these reproduction, evacuation, all these things that we help us do things in the world, they're called senses of action. So five senses of knowledge, five senses of action together constitute the 10 sense organs. And then the mind, that's why it is said the 10 sense organ and the one. The mind also is considered the 11th sense organ. And now, one other clarification. When I say I as the sense organ, don't mistake it for this. So, well, we do say this is an I, of course, but this is not really the sense organ. The sense organ is the subtler part of this. Maybe, probably if you go back, the optic nerve, that part which gives these eyes the capacity to see. Because we know that this itself is just a doorway for the sights to go in. For someone, it's possible for people to lose their eyesight and have these eyes intact. So sometimes people may be just looking, and this is fine, but they are not seeing anything if their optic nerve is hurt. So the real sense of perception is not this external, this is just a door. So similarly, of course, I mean, it's not like deaf people, this ear vanishes from them. So this is just a doorway through which sound will go. But the actual sense of hearing is more subtle. So these sense organs are the subtler things, and what we see externally are just their gross manifestations. And the five objects are the senses. Now, this is I wish we had some kind of a board or something to draw, but since we don't have it here, what I have done is later on, if you look up the center's Facebook page, I have put there is a notes section there, and I have uploaded one note which gives whatever I'm saying now. You will see in a kind of a diagrammatic way, which kind of put it in a visual way. It makes it a little bit easier. So later on, when you get a chance, take a look at the Facebook page and look at those notes. The interesting thing in this is this, that why is it that my eyes are able to see and my ears are able to hear? Why cannot my ears see and my eyes hear? The way this structure is formulated is this, that the sense organ, for instance, let me give you an example, a concrete example. So it says the five objects of the senses: sight, sound, touch, smell. These are all objects of the senses. The material from which the senses are made and the material from which the objects are made are the same. In other words, the sense of perception, it's a material entity. It's made up among those five great elements. The major part of the sense of perception is light, fire. And that is why it is able to see light. That is the connection between the eyes and light. And the forms, so all the forms that we see, they belong to that same category. So similarly, the sense of hearing is made up of, again, is made among the five elements with space. And therefore, the corresponding object, sound, also has the characteristic of space. So as I said, take a look at the diagram. Some of you who had attended the Panchadashi classes that we had a few years ago, this week was discussed in the very first chapter of that book on Panchadashi. So you can either look it up in that Panchadashi book, or you can look up this notes that I have put up on Facebook. Now, if you add up all these, so one other small point that to be noted. These five objects of the senses, they are really, technically, they are called Mahabhutas. So they are really the material elements which have combined and have now become visible. So if the first five great elements are the subtle form, the five objects of the senses are the gross form of those same thing. So if you add these up, say five great elements, egoism 6, intellect 7, unmanifest 8, the 10 sense organ make it 18, one mind 19, and the five objects of senses makes it 24. So these are called the 24 principles out of which the entire material universe is made. Some of you who have read the Gospel of Ramakrishna might notice that sometimes Ramakrishna refers to these 24 principles. There is a philosophy called Sankhya. In the Sankhya philosophy, they speak about this whole Prakriti, the entire material universe constituted of these 24 principles. And that is why Krishna refers to these in verse number 5. If you add these up, the number is exactly 24. Now, the things which are mentioned in verse number 6, they are found in another of the orthodox philosophies called Vaisheshika. Now, in that philosophy, they mention these things: desire, aversion, happiness, misery, the body, intelligence, and patience as characteristics or as attributes of spirit. So Krishna mentioned them separately here to show that they are not spirit. They are also a part of matter. So according to the Vedantic worldview, all of these things, including desire, aversion, happiness, and so on, all of these things belong to the material universe. So this is a very, as Krishna says here, Kshetra here has been described in brief together with its modifications. So just keep this at the back of your mind, that when we speak about the world, when we speak about the material world, or the material universe, all of these things are included. Both as a person, the body, mind, ego, intellect, and so on, but also this entire universe. All of this is material. Now, Krishna began this chapter by saying that there are two things. There is the material part of the world and there is the spiritual. So what is described here is the material. Now we need to go and see, but then what is spirit? If this is all matter, then what is spirit? Now, Krishna does something not very logical here, it might seem. We would have normally expected that, well, after describing matter, next thing he would do is, well, start describing spirit. What he does instead is he describes the qualities we need to cultivate, to develop in order for us to get that knowledge, in order for us to get to know the spirit. So these are ways of acquiring the capacity to know the spirit. And you have this another list of qualities. Many of you have already worked on the qualities we saw in chapter 12. So here you have another list. So let's read them and then go through them one by one. So verses 7 through 11. So let's read them together. Amanitvam adambhitvam ahimsa kshantirarjavam acharyopasanam shaucham स्थैर्यमात्म विनिग्रहः इंद्रियार्थेषु वैराग्यम् अनहंकार एव च जन्म मृत्यु जरा व्याधि दुःख दोषानुदर्शनम् असक्तिरनभिष्वङ्गः पुत्रदारगृहादिषु नित्यं च समचित्तत्वम् इष्टानिष्टोपपत्तिषु मयि चानन्ययोगेन भक्तिरव्यभिचारिणी विविक्तदेशसेवित्वम् अरतिर्जनसंसदि अध्यात्मज्ञाननित्यत्वम् तत्त्वज्ञानार्थदर्शनम् एतज्ज्ञानमिति प्रोक्तम् अज्ञानं यदतोऽन्यथा. Get ready for this big list now. Humility, unostentatiousness, harmlessness, forbearance, uprightness, service to the Guru, purity, steadiness, self-control, dispassion for sense objects, an absence of egoism, seeing misery and evil in birth, death, old age and sickness, non-attachment and non-identification with son, wife, home, etc., always being even-minded whether good or evil befalls, unswerving devotion to me through the yoga of non-separation, resorting to solitude and aversion for company, always being devoted to spiritual knowledge, perception of the aim of the knowledge of truth, all this is called knowledge. What is different from this is ignorance. You will see many of these qualities came also in chapter 12. So we will have these different ways Krishna will be emphasizing the importance of certain qualities in life which are vital in order for us to make progress in spiritual life. So we are not going to finish all these today, so let's take up a few. Humility. If you look up the commentary on page 376, each of these qualities just described very briefly. Humility, not boasting of one's virtues. Now, this is very important. Humility does not mean demeaning oneself. Sometimes people like to think, oh, if I keep on saying, oh, I'm a nobody, I'm useless, I'm worthless, then that I'm being very humble. That's not what humility is. Humility doesn't mean that you are not aware of your strengths. In fact, true humility is possible only from a position of strength. Weak people, insecure people can never be humble. They can just make a show of humility. So, humility means having a correct assessment of what one's strengths are, what one's weaknesses are. But having known one's strength, you don't go about showing it off. You don't go on boasting. You don't get that, oh, how great I am. So long as you know you have strengths, but you don't boast about it, you are being humble. And the way of cultivating that is to recognize that no matter what strengths I have, there's always someone in the world who has the same strengths in a much greater measure than me. That really would keep me humble. Unless you are Donald Trump and you think, I'm the best. Otherwise, humility would mean that, yes, in some ways I have these great strengths, which is wonderful, and I'm happy that I have these strengths, but recognize that the world is just too big. There are other people who may have the same strengths in a much better way. So that will keep me humble. So it's very interesting how to maintain one's self-esteem and be humble at the same time. They apparently might seem to be mutually contradictory qualities. People think if I'm to be humble, then how can I just feel good about myself? Actually, the two are not contradictory. We have to preserve our dignity. We have to have that self-esteem. And it's possible to be humble at the same time. And that's why I said true humility comes through a position of strength. That is why that one verse which was referred to, let's see, where we saw last time. Oh, it's not here. There's one saying in Sanskrit which says, Vidya dadati vinayam. That is, knowledge, true knowledge bestows humility. And that's what I meant by being humble from the position of strength. That is, people who truly know, they are automatically humble. So if we find at some point a kind of pride entering into our heart, a kind of vanity entering into our heart, you can be very sure that my knowledge has not become complete yet. It's only this incomplete knowledge that produces that kind of vanity, and we have to be very careful. Sometimes they say a kind of a classical example given about this is that in a gathering, some kind of a family social gathering, there's this little girl sitting next to one big scientist, and so she asked this while they are having dinner. The little girl asks the scientist, so what do you do? And he is an astronomer. He's a very, very advanced astronomer. And so he tells the little girl, I study astronomy. And then little girl says, you're still studying astronomy? I finished mine last semester. So Now, obviously, it's just to show that even this person who knows so much is able to express it by saying, I'm a study astronomy. Little girl, it's not that little girl is vain about it, but just this is how an expression it will come. Oh, I know it already. So never say, I know. In fact, in one of the Upanishads, it is said that one who says, I know, doesn't know. One who says, I don't know, knows. And so always recognize that no matter how good you may be at anything, there are always somebody else in the universe who is better than you. And that recognizing that someone may be better than you should not produce sadness in you, like, oh, I'm not the best. Neither should it produce a kind of envy, like, why is that person, or jealousy. Actually, if you see someone better than you at something, a positive response to that would be, that's an inspiration. It shows the possibility in a human mind, that if one human being can achieve excellence, the rest of us who have not yet have hope. If that person can do it, I can do it too. So rather than looking at it negatively and giving rise to envy or jealousy, we can say, if you find someone better than you at something, you say, I will also try then to be better myself. So that's the way to push yourself towards excellence. So you're not competing with someone else, you're really competing with your own self. You then recognize that there is this potentiality within you, but maybe I have not expressed it fully yet. So this can be a call for self-improvement. And so that's what humility can do. Second is adambitvam, unostentatiousness, absence of wanting. Again, not all of these qualities are completely distinct from each other. You will see that they are kind of flow into each other. They are interrelated. So again, when you find that there is some strength that you have, either as a quality or some material possession, don't want it before others. Don't go on boasting about it or showing it to others. You might say, well, what is wrong with it? Well, the wrong with it is, if you do this, you are going to remain ignorant from a spiritual standpoint. Remaining ignorant from a spiritual standpoint would mean you are never going to be free from these clutches of selfishness, hatred, jealousy, anger. And it is these things that produce pain and suffering in life. So if someone wants to go and boast and show off before others and do just the opposite of these qualities, you are welcome to it. But recognize then that's not the way to be free from pain and suffering. So if you want to be free from pain and suffering, you need to get rid of ignorance. In order to get rid of ignorance, you need to cultivate these qualities. So please keep that at the back of your mind. Then ahimsa. Ahimsa is put here, harmlessness, avoiding causing pain to others. Again, ahimsa, sometimes translated as non-violence. It's not simply about not hurting others physically. It's not about that, oh, I don't carry any gun, so I'm a non-violent person. Sure, to some level, yes. But it's possible to not hurt anyone physically, but it's possible to hurt others in a more subtle way. We can hurt others through our talk, the way we talk. So a hurtful speech, hurting someone's feelings consciously. Unconsciously, if you do it, of course, I mean, you didn't mean to do it, that's different. But knowingly, fully aware that what you're going to say is going to bring pain to someone, that is violence. It can get even more subtle than using hurtful speech, even hurtful thought. So jealousy is a form of violence. Wishing ill of someone, wishing bad about someone, that's violence. There is a sutra in Patanjali's aphorisms which says that ahimsayam pratisthayam vairatyagaha when a person becomes established in the quality of non-violence, no one will be able to harbor thoughts of enmity in that person's presence. In other words, being established in non-violence simply doesn't mean that I don't kill anybody. It means that I don't hurt anybody, neither physically, nor through my speech, nor through my thoughts. If someone has reached that state perfectly, then that person can truly say, I'm established in the virtue of non-violence. In the commentary to the Yoga Sutras, they point out, if and when a person reaches that state, lions and tigers will come close to that person and not even think of hurting him. It will be impossible for anybody, any living creature, human beings or animals, to do any violence in the presence of such a person. You see that in the life of St. Francis of Assisi, for instance. You hear all these birds would just come and perch on his shoulders and everything. So that's what non-violence means. All of these qualities mentioned here, don't take them simply in a very gross sense. All of these can be practiced or also violated through thoughts or through speech. So always consider it at all these three levels, in action, through words, and through thoughts. So the goal is to practice them at all these three levels. So we will stop here today. There's a lot to be discussed, as we will do in our future classes. But if you have any thoughts, questions, ideas, feel free to ask.
So you mentioned that all material objects are composed of the 5 great elements. Mm-hmm. So can we consider ego to be some ingredient? And if so, is it only living objects that have ego? Is it only humans that have ego? How do I understand ego as an ingredient similar to the 5 great elements?
The thing is this, anyone can be aware of only their ego. So it's not a question between living or non-living. I am aware of only my ego, I. Even you are a living being, I think, but now even only you are aware of your ego. As far as I am concerned, I can only kind of infer, well, I'm a human being, I have an ego, you are a human being, so you likely have an ego. But your ego can be directly experienced only by you, and my ego can be directly experienced only by me. There is no way for me to know whether this table has an ego. I really don't know. I would imagine, though, about material entities, clearly, there's no way to. I mean, from a human perspective, if I say to the table, get out of the way, the table doesn't get out of the way. So I would think, well, it doesn't understand my language, or it doesn't have an ego. I mean, that's how we distinguish living and non-living. I mean, how else am I to know what this table is thinking or not thinking? But if there is a dog, and I tell the dog, hey, come here, and the dog comes, well, I would say, dog, I must have some ego. Without the sense of I, why would the dog either listen or not listen to me? So we can know about the ego in someone else only through some tests like this, but there is no definitive way to know. Yeah.
Swamiji, knowledge and ignorance cannot be in the same boat, correct? If so, then as a devotee, and I stand because I do have a knowledge of my ignorance. So where do I stand? Like, I do not have the full knowledge, but I do have a knowledge that I am ignorant and I want to learn something. So where do I stand? Which boat I am?
Yes, so yes, good question. The misperception occurs when both light and darkness are kind of there together. But by that I mean if there is a partial darkness. And of course, that's why that classical example of a rope being mistaken for a snake. Now, if that room were pitch dark, it was like total ignorance, there would be no misperception. But now there is a little bit of light. So that little bit of light, if there were full light, I would know the truth. My knowledge would be complete. But this little bit of light produces enough knowledge for me to know something is there, but insufficient knowledge to know what that thing is. So that's how at present we have ignorance and we have knowledge of our ignorance. Because if we didn't have knowledge of our ignorance, we would not even know that we are ignorant. And actually, a lot of people don't know that they are ignorant. But those of us who begin to think about these things, even before we begin to strive for knowledge, we must first accept that we are ignorant. Otherwise, why else would we want knowledge? It's pretty much like people who have an illness. Why would anyone want any treatment for an illness unless they first accept the fact that I am ill? So if I'm in total denial about my sickness, then I wouldn't even strive to get rid of it. So exactly in the same way, even in order for us to want knowledge, first we must have knowledge of our ignorance, accept that we are ignorant, then strive for knowledge. Is that clear? Yeah. Any other?
Swami, I'm not sure if I had heard it from you, but I thought I did, which is a definition of humility would be not thinking less of yourself, but thinking more of others. Did I hear that from you?
No, I don't think I ever put it that way.
Oh, okay.
I don't know in what sense it is said, think more of others. I would think that we neither need to underestimate ourselves or overestimate other people. So when you say think more of others, if it is in the sense of overestimating others, I think that's not a good idea either. Why not just see things as they are? Recognize, look into yourself, see things as they are. Yes, there are some strengths, there are some weaknesses. You look somebody else and say, well, this person has some strengths and weaknesses. But, and know this well, just as we know that, and everyone, I imagine everyone feels it, it is this. Pretty much I would think most people feel that I really know who I am. Most people don't really know who I am. Even my closest friend probably doesn't know everything about me. So, when we look at our own strengths and weaknesses, we have more access to data. But everyone else's data is encrypted, if you like, to some extent, because you're not like going inside someone's head to see what's going on. So your judgment about what other people's strengths and weaknesses are just based on your external observance, that's all. But because you are able to peer into yourself, your assessment of your own strength and weaknesses is generally will be accurate if you don't underestimate or overestimate yourself or others. So it's not thinking less about yourself or more about others. It's just knowing who you are, knowing how others are. Now, what I said was this, that even when you identify some strengths in yourself, it's possible that the people around you, with whom you move around, with your family, your friends, you might discover that none of them has the strength that you have. And then that can you make you feel a little bit proud of yourself, like, I know these things and none of these guys know it. Now what I'm saying is, but you don't know, this world is not infinite, but it's a pretty big place. There are billions of people in this world. And I don't know every person on this planet. So even if I have certain strengths that the people I know don't have it, I think I can be very realistic in saying there may be someone in this world who has this strength in a much better way than I do, and which is a very real possibility. Recognizing this will keep me humble. But what I don't want this statement to be understood as is just for me to keep humble, I should look upon everyone around me like, oh, this person is so great, this person is so great. You don't have to kind of, as I said, be realistic. Try to get a real assessment, not undervaluing anything, nor overvaluing anything. Okay.
What's interesting to me is, where did I hear that then? I don't know where I heard. I thought I heard it from you, but that's fine. I don't know where I heard it.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You see, the thing is this: if anything makes sense, accept it. Doesn't matter where you read it. If anything doesn't make sense, again, don't accept it. Doesn't matter from where it came. Yeah.
So when you started this today's lecture, you said everything is not real and everything is unreal. And when I open my eyes, it is basically like I'm creating my world. If that's the case, and how I am responsible for creating something while I am in my world on which I have no control. For example, while I'm awake, somebody else is creating something else which I don't even know.
Say that again, the second part?
So, if everything is unreal, then how come there are so many other things happening which seem to be real, which I'm not creating actually?
What do you mean you're not creating? But you see, the thing is this. When I say you are creating it, what I am saying is this. If I ask you, how do you know there is a world there, out there? Well, the only answer you have is, I'm seeing it, right?
Yeah.
And what other proof do you have that the world is there, other than saying I'm experiencing it? You don't have any other proof besides that. But what I'm saying is, when you are fast asleep, you're not experiencing the world. Are you? You're not experiencing the world. There is no way for you to know whether the world is really there or not. Because the thing is this, if experiencing itself makes something very real, then your dream should be real too, because you're experiencing it. So do you believe that when you wake up in the morning and your dream finishes, the dream world is still continuing somewhere, or it's just gone? Do you believe that you created your dream? Or do you believe that the people in the dream are still watching it, just that you have gotten out of it?
It sounds like that right now with the real world.
No, I'm talking about the dream now.
No, not the dream.
Why not the dream? You are experiencing it.
Because I'm the one who was creating that dream.
Well, exactly in the same way. You've created this. You destroyed the dream when you woke up. You will destroy this world when you go to sleep. Think about it. That's why this is called in Vedanta text, this is called Nitya Srishti. It's like it's a daily creation and daily destruction. And just keep it at the corner of your mind. This is a pretty, very radically different way of understanding everything. But recognize this, and again I'll close here because this is a really big subject. When you watch it, when you see a dream at night, do you feel it's a new dream, or do you feel, once you're in the dream, do you feel like, oh, this is a new dream today? You don't feel. Even within 1 minute into your dream, you don't think that the dream world was created only a minute ago. You think, well, this world has always been there, right? So there is no way for us to prove or disprove whether the world that you see every morning after waking up is the same world that you saw the previous day. Think about it also. As I said, if this idea find too staggering, too worrying, don't worry too much. But when you are in a mood to be little adventurous and have nothing much else to do that day, sit near your window and just think about it. Because it's a very different way of looking at ourselves and the world. And because we have looked at ourselves and the world in a very different way until this point, not just for the last few years, maybe for the last several lives, that has become our default way of thinking. And changing our way of thinking is more difficult than changing your car or your computer. And that's hassle also, but much less hassle than changing your just way of thinking. So it's a big subject. We
have one question, one online question.
All right, so the last question and we'll stop. Yeah.
So Ashok is asking, are you saying perfect knowledge is not possible until we are perfect? Which seems to be impossible.
Perfect knowledge is not possible until we are perfect?
And he says, which seems to be impossible.
Well, which comes first? When we get knowledge, we will become perfect. So, yes. So when we, in other words, well, put it this way, again, in the context of what we are saying, that we think we are imperfect because of ignorance. So when we are able to remove ignorance, we will know that we have been perfect always. So even our sense of imperfection now is the result of ignorance. That in reality, even at this very moment as we sit, at this very moment, every one of us is pure, perfect, and eternal. We are eternal. There is no birth for us, no death for us. Right now, the only problem, the slight problem is we don't know it. Well, we know it now. Through reading this text, we know it, but that's still intellectual. But it hasn't become as much a way of my thinking as I'm a human being. Now, as I said, to know that you are a human being, you don't need the Gita, because it's become a part of your life, part of your thinking. You know you're a human being, you don't have any doubt about it. When a stage is reached, you will know that I'm the infinite being and have no doubt about it, then you have become perfect. Then you will need a book to find out, why do people say they are human beings? Right now, so it will be just the opposite. Okay, so we will start now. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So I must congratulate all of you who have done your homework so well. I've received, so that's become now I know why teachers and professors get so busy after the exams are over. I've got so many papers and emails to look at, but I'm very impressed that all of you have worked so hard. Not only all of you who are present here, but there are many who have been listening to these classes on the live streams. So I've received these homework assignments from very distant places, so those who are watching it on streaming, and I'm very, very impressed by it. So my hope is in the next few days to put all your hard work together and kind of make one master list. And I'll again put it up in one place which from where all of you will have access to it. So thank you for doing your homework so well. On Sunday, our subject for satsang will be to do or not to do. Hamlet's problem was to be or not to be. So this is a different kind of a problem. And next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita. And Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual. So let's conclude with a prayer now on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.